He pointed a gun at her head. He thought it was funny, but in less than 3 seconds, he was on the ground disarmed, humiliated, and terrified. What this overconfident cadet didn't know was that the woman he mocked was a former Navy SEAL with over 20 years of battlefield experience. This is not just a story about discipline, it's a story about transformation, respect, and why you never mess with a Navy SEAL. Before we continue, drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? We'd love to see how far this story reaches. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because this story is just getting started. Most of the cadets thought it would be another routine training week at Fort Braxton, a dusty military base tucked away in the plains of Oklahoma. The sun scorched the ground, and the only thing sharper than the desert wind was the arrogance of the new recruits. Among them stood Dylan Knox, barely 20, cocky and loud, always the one cracking jokes and testing limits. He and the others were preparing for what they assumed would be an easy lesson from yet another washed-out instructor. But that morning, everything changed. Stepping out of the blacked-out SUV was Commander Natalie Pierce, a woman in her early 40s, dressed in a crisp combat uniform. She was lean, composed, and her calm gaze sliced through the cadets like a blade. No introduction, no speech, just a presence that demanded attention. "She's just a formality," Dylan muttered, smirking. "Probably hasn't seen a real fight in years." But what none of them knew was that Natalie wasn't just any instructor. She was a former Navy SEAL with over 2 decades of classified missions, hostage rescues, and combat under her belt. And she had zero tolerance for disrespect. They were about to learn that the hard way. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the training yard as the cadets gathered for what they believed would be a dull physical assessment. Their laughter echoed off the barracks, boots thudding rhythmically on the packed dirt. Commander Natalie Pierce stood at the front, silent as always, arms folded across her chest, expression unreadable. "All right, recruits," she finally said, her voice sharp but calm. "Today, we'll be running a series of close-quarter drills. Pair up." The cadets groaned but obeyed, breaking off into teams. Dylan Knox rolled his eyes dramatically and nudged his buddy Ryan. "Let's show her how it's done," he whispered with a smirk. As the drills began, Pierce moved through the ranks, observing. Her movements were precise, her attention unyielding. Every now and then, she'd correct a stance, reposition a grip, or bark a command that snapped the cadets back to focus. But Dylan, he was waiting for his moment. The tension had been building all morning. Dylan didn't like authority, especially not from someone he'd already written off as a decorated ghost, someone who used to be tough, but now just barked orders. He was confident, cocky, and itching to prove something to his friends, to himself. And then it happened. Pierce stepped behind him during a takedown drill. "Too loose," she said firmly. "You're leaving your flank wide open. Adjust your—" Without thinking, Dylan spun around mockingly, dramatically, and in one fluid motion, pulled the training pistol from his partner's holster and pointed it at Pierce's head. The yard froze. Everyone stopped. Gasps. Nervous laughter. Half the cadets thought it was a joke. The other half didn't know what to think. "Bang?" Dylan grinned. "Guess I'm not that open after all." "Huh? Commander." The world seemed to pause. And then it exploded. In less than a second, Natalie's arm shot up, redirecting the weapon's barrel skyward. Her knee connected with Dylan's stomach, knocking the wind from his lungs. Before he hit the ground, she had spun, disarmed him, and had his arm twisted painfully behind his back. Dirt kicked up as he fell hard. His face hit the ground. Hard. The cadets stood in stunned silence. No one laughed now. Pierce didn't yell. She didn't gloat. She stood tall over Dylan, still holding the training pistol. Her eyes scanned the group, steady and sharp. "I don't play games," she said coldly, "and I don't tolerate threats, even fake ones." Dylan groaned, still trying to catch his breath. Pierce finally knelt beside him. "You ever point a weapon at someone again, even as a joke, and you'd better be ready for a real consequence. That includes combat, that includes court-martial, that includes a flag-draped casket. Is that what you want?" Knox. He didn't answer. She leaned closer, voice low but firm. "I've had brothers in arms shot in the back because someone thought the safety was on. I've carried teammates out of firefights because some hotshot thought training was just a game. You're not here to impress anyone. You're here to learn how to stay alive and keep your brothers alive. 2. She stood. Everyone back in line. No one moved slowly. The cadets scrambled to form up, shoulders stiff, eyes forward. All arrogance had drained from their faces. Even Dylan, still coughing dust from his lungs, limped back into position without a word. From that moment forward, the energy at Fort Braxton shifted. Pierce wasn't just some mysterious instructor anymore. She was the real thing. And Dylan, he'd just become the example everyone else would remember. Training wasn't just serious now, it was personal. 3 days had passed since the gun incident, and the atmosphere at Fort Braxton had completely transformed. The cadets were quieter, sharper, and more alert. Nobody dared test Commander Natalie Pierce anymore, not after what she did to Dylan Knox in front of everyone. Dylan had changed. 2. He no longer swaggered across the yard or made snide comments. He showed up early, he listened, he trained harder than anyone else. But there was something behind his eyes, a mix of guilt and something else. Maybe respect, maybe shame. Natalie noticed. She noticed everything. By the 4th day, she decided to push the recruits further. At 00:0300 alarms blared through the barracks. Lights flashed, sirens screamed. The cadets scrambled out of bed, disoriented, boots half-laced, rushing into the freezing dark. Natalie stood at the front gate in full gear. "Simulation alert!" She barked. "Live hostage extraction drill. No rehearsal, no warm-up. You screw up, someone dies. Move out." They loaded into trucks and were driven out to the edge of the base, a mock urban village used for combat scenarios. Dilapidated buildings, smoke grenades, audio of fake gunfire. It looked and sounded terrifyingly real. Their mission: locate and extract a civilian asset held by enemy forces in a 2-story building in the center of town. Recruits were divided into fire teams. Dylan's team, 4 of them, was assigned to lead the initial entry. As they crept through the foggy alleyways, Dylan's heart pounded harder than it ever had. This wasn't a game. Even though it was a drill, it felt real. Too real. Explosions echoed. Gunfire popped from speakers. Strobe lights flickered. Adrenaline took over. Dylan led the way up the stairs, holding his rifle tight, checking every corner like Natalie had drilled into them. At the 2nd floor, they found the hostage a mannequin dressed in civilian clothing tied to a chair, a fake IED strapped to its chest. A countdown timer blinked red, so 1:14. Panic set in. "We weren't trained for disarming bombs," one of the cadets yelled. "That's not the point," Dylan snapped. "We need to extract and call EOD. Standard protocol." But just as they turned to move, a loud bang erupted behind them. One of the cadets, startled by a noise, had tripped a pressure plate. Suddenly, the door behind them slammed shut. Steel bars locked in place. A robotic voice blared from hidden speakers. "Booby trap activated, hostage compromised, protocol hold until extraction." The lights went out, and the screaming started. Not from the simulation. From real people. Downstairs, gunfire, not the speaker kind, echoed through the building. Shouts. Chaos. Something was wrong. The 4 cadets looked at each other. This wasn't part of the drill. Then their radios crackled to life. All units, hostile breach, detected training perimeter compromised. This is not a drill secure position. Stay down. Are you kidding me? One cadet whispered, voice trembling. Natalie's voice broke through, next calm but urgent. Alpha Team, report status. Dylan, do you copy? He grabbed his radio, hands shaking. We're trapped on the 2nd floor, hostage dummy intact. But we're locked in. I think someone tripped a plate. Copy that, she replied. Hold tight. Real threat detected. I'm coming to get you. You're what Dylan blinked. Ma'am, it's dangerous. You can't. But she was already gone. Down below. Natalie Pierce was moving like a shadow. 2 armed intruders had breached the training ground, part of a security breach no one had seen coming. Maybe it was a gang. Maybe a rogue faction. It didn't matter. She was trained for moments like this. As Dylan and his team waited, terrified, something shifted inside him. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about surviving and trusting the woman he had once mocked. 10 minutes later, the bars were forced open. Smoke poured in. And through it emerged Natalie, rifle in hand, eyes scanning the room. Time to move, gentlemen, she said calmly, like this was any other day. No one argued. As they made their way out, Dylan took one last glance at the hostage. The simulation may have been fake, but everything else? Dead real. And from that moment on, Dylan Knox wasn't just a cadet anymore. He was a soldier in the making. The sun was rising by the time they returned to Fort Braxton. The sky, tinged in soft hues of orange and purple, contrasted sharply with the storm of emotions crashing inside Dylan Knox's chest. His clothes were soaked with sweat and dust, his hands still trembling from the adrenaline crash. But more than that, his mind was replaying everything on a loop: the sirens, the shots, the panic, and Natalie Pierce walking into danger without a second thought. They were told to stand down for 24 hours while the breach was investigated. The intruders had been neutralized. No lives lost. But the message was clear. Real danger doesn't come with warning signs or second chances. Dylan sat alone on the steps behind the barracks, eyes staring into the distance. He wasn't thinking about drills anymore. Not about scores. Not about ranking higher than the next guy. He was thinking about responsibility, about what it meant when someone trusted you with their life. Natalie Pierce found him there. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside him, sipping her black coffee, watching the same quiet horizon. After a moment, she broke the silence. "You froze for a second up there," she said. Not accusing, just stating a fact. "I know," Dylan replied, voice low. "I thought I was ready for everything. Turns out, I wasn't ready for anything." Natalie glanced at him, her expression softer than he expected. "You were scared," she said. "So was I." He turned to her, shocked. "You." She smiled faintly. "Fear is normal. What you do with it is what matters." Dylan looked down at his hands. "I thought being a soldier meant being fearless, unstoppable." "That's a myth," Natalie said firmly. "Real soldiers are human. We're scared. We bleed. We break. But we get back up. We don't quit. And when the time comes, we stand between danger and the people who can't protect themselves." He swallowed hard. Words caught in his throat. "I used to think this was just a stepping stone," he admitted. "Do a few years, get out. Maybe use the benefits. I never really understood it until today." Natalie nodded slowly. "Most don't." "Not right away." She stood, stretching slightly, and looked down at him. "Pain teaches, fear humbles, experience transforms. but only if you let it. He looked up at her. Really looked at her for the first time without bias, without resentment. There were creases around her eyes, a few streaks of gray in her hair, but nothing about her looked tired. She looked solid, unbreakable. And now, he understood. Why? "Commander Pierce," he said, rising to his feet, "I owe you an apology." "For what she asked?" "For everything," he replied. "For underestimating you, for the gun, for being a punk." She gave him a half smile. "You're not the first, won't be the last. But you're learning. That's what matters." He stood straighter now, something in him beginning to shift. Not just guilt, not just gratitude. Purpose. "Permission to train harder," he said. She raised an eyebrow. "You don't need permission for that." He grinned, for the first time in days, but it wasn't the cocky smirk of a boy trying to show off. It was the grin of a young man who had finally found direction. That afternoon, when the cadets were cleared to resume training, Dylan was the first one on the field. No jokes, no distractions, just focus. He didn't just follow orders. He led by example. He pushed his teammates, not to compete, but to protect, to prepare. Other cadets noticed. And so did Commander Pierce, from the observation tower. She watched him coach a struggling teammate through an obstacle course, his voice calm but firm, the way she had once spoken to him. Something had changed in Dylan Knox. The boy who had pointed a gun for laughs was now becoming the man who would one day put himself in front of one to save someone else. And Natalie, she didn't smile. She just nodded once and walked away. Mission underway. 2 weeks had passed since the breach at Fort Braxton. The days were longer, the drills harder, and the expectations even higher. But Dylan Knox didn't complain. He had stopped asking when the pain would end. Now, he welcomed it. Every morning before sunrise, he was up running laps around the base. Every night, he was the last one to leave the training grounds. His uniform was always soaked with sweat. His hands blistered and raw, but his eyes sharper, focused, unshakable. Commander Natalie Pierce watched his transformation with quiet satisfaction. She'd seen cadets burn out. She'd seen them break. But this Dylan wasn't just improving, he was evolving. Then, one evening after drills, she called him into her office. It was a sparse room, no decoration, no distractions, just a single photo on the desk, a younger Natalie standing with a SEAL team, all in full combat gear, faces smudged with dirt, but grinning like wolves. "Take a seat," she said, without looking up. Dylan sat, unsure of what was coming. He had triple-checked his gear. He knew he hadn't broken protocol. "You've changed," she said simply. He nodded. "I'm trying, ma'am." "No, you did," she corrected. "There's a difference." She finally looked at him. "Tell me, what do you know about Phase 3? Dylan blinked. "Phase 3 of what?" "Advanced Close Operations," she said. "It's a special sub-program only offered to cadets who've shown combat potential and emotional control. I thought that was reserved for enlisted candidates." Dylan replied, "We're just trainees." "Exactly," she said, "but rules bend when someone earns it." He sat up straighter. "Are you saying I'm being considered? I'm saying you've already been chosen." His heart slammed against his ribs. "Tomorrow morning at 500, a black transport will pick you up," she continued. "You won't know where you're going. You won't know who you're training with. You won't have a schedule. The only thing you'll have is your gear and your grit." He could hardly believe what he was hearing. Natalie leaned back. "This is not about reward. This is pressure, psychological and physical. You will be pushed past exhaustion. You will be isolated, mock interrogated, denied sleep. They'll try to break you. Dylan, just to see if you're worth building back up." He swallowed hard. And if I fail, she paused, then said evenly, then you go back to being a cadet. No shame in that. But if you pass... She leaned forward, voice dropping. You'll never be the same. Silence stretched in the room. I don't deserve this, Dylan finally said. Natalie shook her head. No one deserves it. You earn it, one painful inch at a time. And you have... He looked at the photo on her desk again, that younger version of her, standing tall among warriors. That's who she still was, and that's who he wanted to become. I'm in, he said. Natalie nodded once. Then be ready, and tell no one. The next morning, at precisely 0459, a blacked-out transport rolled through the back gate. No insignia. No questions. Dylan climbed aboard. Inside were 3 other recruits from other bases, all of them silent, tense, focused. No one spoke. No one needed to. The vehicle drove for hours. Through forests. Then desert. Then silence. Finally, it stopped. They had arrived at a facility unlike anything Dylan had ever seen, remote, steel-reinforced, surrounded by watchtowers and razor wire. A sign at the gate simply read, Phased Third Operations Authorized Personnel Only. A man in black fatigues stepped forward and pointed, Line up, eyes forward, welcome to hell. And just like that, Dylan Knox stepped into a new world, one filled with unknown dangers, brutal challenges, and the kind of pressure that crushes bones and tempers souls. But he wasn't afraid. Not anymore, because now he had a reason, and something far greater than pride was driving him forward. The first rule at Phase Throw was simple. Don't ask questions. The second rule, no one's coming to save you. From the moment Dylan Knox stepped off the black transport and onto the gravel grounds of the covert training compound, everything he knew about discipline, teamwork, and pain was shattered and rebuilt from scratch. They stripped him of rank, of comfort, of identity. In Phase 3, you weren't Dylan. You were 13, just a number on a tag, and even that could be taken from you if you didn't earn it daily. The instructors were different here, not soldiers, but shadows. Former Special Forces operatives who never smiled, never flinched, and never raised their voices. Somehow, that made them more terrifying. The first week was physical annihilation. 12-hour combat endurance drills, sleep deprivation, underwater escape simulations in ice-cold tanks, obstacle courses designed to break bones. And when it was over, they'd start again, backwards. One cadet quit on day 2. Another passed out during waterboarding simulation and didn't return. But Dylan, he hung on not because he was the strongest, but because he had something to prove. Every time his legs gave out, he thought of the gun he once held to Commander Pierce's head and the shame that still haunted him. Every time he wanted to scream in pain, he remembered how she had walked into a real threat without hesitation. And every time he felt like quitting, he whispered to himself, "You owe her better than that." By week 3, everything began to change. His mind stopped resisting. His body adapted. He could run 10 miles in full gear without a word of complaint. He could navigate through pitch-black mazes blindfolded and underwater. He could hold his breath for 2.5 minutes and shoot with perfect aim right after. But it wasn't just the physical, it was the mental. During psychological testing, they isolated him for 48 hours in a sensory deprivation room. White walls, no clocks, no sound, no light, just his thoughts. That was the real battle. On the second day, a door creaked open and a voice said, "You're alone for a reason." It sounded like Natalie Pierce's voice. But it wasn't. That was the test. The next morning, he was still standing quiet, calm, eyes forward, He passed. Then came the final challenge, the walk back. Dropped alone in the wilderness with no GPS, no weapons, no food, just a compass, and a sealed envelope marked "Open only if you give up." Most didn't make it. The journey was 72 hours long, through steep canyons, freezing rain, and hostile terrain. On the second night, Dylan fell into a river crossing and nearly lost his pack, hypothermic, shivering, bloodied. He stared at the envelope under the moonlight. He could have opened it. He could have quit. But instead, he burned it. When he stumbled back into the gates of Phase 3 at sunrise, face pale and limbs numb, the lead instructor looked at him and said nothing. He just nodded once. That was enough. At the end of the course, only 5 out of 20 candidates remained. They weren't given medals. No one clapped. Instead, they were handed black nameplates. Dylan's read, "Knox, verified forward operative. Provisional." He didn't smile. He just ran his fingers over the etched letters and breathed in deep. He wasn't the same person anymore. Not the cocky kid from Fort Braxton. Not the hothead who made a joke with a gun. Not the cadet who thought war was a game. He was something else now. Something forged. And when he returned to Fort Braxton a week later, walking into the dusty training yard in full black ops uniform, the entire camp stopped and stared. But the only one he looked for was her. Commander Natalie Pierce stood at the edge of the field, arms crossed, just like the first day he met her. "You came back," she said. "I didn't have a choice," Dylan replied. "I had something to finish." She stepped forward, looked him over. "You look different." "I am different," he said, "because of you." And for the first time since he'd known her. Natalie Pierce smiled. The final ceremony at Fort Braxton was never meant to be grand. No flags waving, no parade, just a quiet gathering of cadets in formation. Boots pressed into the earth, heads held high beneath a golden evening sun. Dylan Knox stood among them, uniform crisp, posture sharp, black nameplate glinting on his chest. But what stood out wasn't what he wore. It was the way he stood. Grounded. Steady. A soldier. Through and through. Commander Natalie Pierce took the podium. Her voice was calm, but each word carried the weight of steel. In this line of work, she began. "We are not measured by medals. We are measured by the moments when no one is watching, when we choose honor over ego, sacrifice over comfort, and action over talk." She paused, her eyes sweeping the formation. "Some of you came here to prove you're tough. Some of you came here to escape something, and a few of you came here not knowing who you were at all." A brief glance in Dylan's direction. "And that's okay. Because growth doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being willing." The cadets stood silently, some blinking back emotion. "For one among you," she continued, "the path wasn't just about survival. It was about transformation. About owning failure and rising above it. About learning to lead, not just follow." She turned toward Dylan. "Cadet Dylan Knox, step forward." He did slow, controlled the sound of his boots heavy in the silence. "You entered this camp with arrogance. You treated training like a game. You pointed a weapon even if fake without understanding the weight behind it. You were reckless, undisciplined." Another pause. "But you listened. You took responsibility. And you changed." She stepped down from the podium and faced him directly. "People often ask me how I spot potential," she said softly. "The answer is simple. It's not the loudest. It's not the strongest. It's the one who gets knocked down and decides not to stay there." She extended her hand. "For your completion of Phase 3, your conduct, and your leadership among cadets, Fort Braxton recommends you for advanced tactical mentorship and forward deployment." Dylan shook her hand. "Thank you, ma'am." "No," she said. "Earn it every day. That's how you thank me." After the ceremony, cadets gathered to congratulate him, the same ones who used to laugh with him, then at him, and now looked at him with respect. Ryan, his old bunkmate, clapped him on the back. "You're a damn machine now, man. What happened to you?" Dylan gave a quiet smile. Commander Pierce happened. That night, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, Dylan sat alone at the edge of the training field. No fanfare, just reflection. Commander Pierce approached, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. She offered him one without a word. He took it, nodding. "Never thought I'd be the guy sitting here." "You weren't," she said, "but you became him." He looked out across the field. "I think I finally get it. This job, it's not about power or toughness." "No," she agreed. "It's about choosing the hard right over the easy wrong. Again and again." Silence. Then she added, "You've still got a long road ahead." "I know," he said. "But now, I'm walking it for the right reasons." She rose to leave. But before she did, she looked back at him with a faint smile. "You're not just ready for war. Knox, you're ready for purpose." And with that, she walked away, her silhouette disappearing into the fading light. Dylan remained there a while longer, watching stars begin to pierce the darkening sky. He thought about the boy he had been, the mistakes, the shame, the almosts. Then he thought about tomorrow, about what kind of man he still had to become. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of the weight on his shoulders. He welcomed it, because now he knew strength isn't in the weapon. It's in the one who chooses when not to pull the trigger. Dylan Knox's journey wasn't just about becoming a soldier, it was about becoming a man of integrity. His transformation taught us that strength isn't found in brute force or bravado, but in the quiet courage to admit fault, to change, and to rise above our past. We often judge others and ourselves by mistakes. But what defines us is not the mistakes we make. It's what we do after them. Commander Natalie Pierce didn't just train cadets. She built character. She didn't punish failure, she demanded accountability. And through that, she awakened something deeper in Dylan purpose, humility, and the kind of leadership that's earned, not claimed. The most powerful lesson: respect is not owed, it's earned. And the only way to truly lead is to first learn how to follow, how to listen, and how to grow. If Dylan's journey moved you, subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss what's next. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that change is possible. Thanks for watching. See you in the next story.